Section 13 of Stanton White, A Romance of the New South, by Asa Zadel Hall. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 13, Gleams from the Darkness. 3 p.m. was the time set for the funeral. At 2:30 the doctor drove up and left his wife. He himself must hasten on to an urgent case and would call on the return trip. Two gentlemen, acquaintances of Mr. Edson in a business way, arrived a little later, and then, after a short wait, Squire White walked in quietly and took the seat to which Stanton motioned him. He did not look around, but kept his eyes on the floor the most of the time, occasionally glancing out the window near which he sat. He had known the bright little fellow, and had taken more than a passing fancy to him. It was now within 5 minutes of the time for the services to commence, and I began to grow anxious lest the officiating clergyman add to the usual faults of the profession the vexing fault of tardiness. Just then a gig was driven rapidly up the lane, and from it alighted a gentleman whose dress proclaimed him to be the one whom we awaited. Assisted by him, a lady of somewhat more sprightly form alighted. The gentleman's step was firm, but slightly inelastic. His features were strong and clean-cut. A halo of silvery hair was pushed back from his full-blooded countenance. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," he exclaimed in a cheery voice, accosting Stanton and me at the door, and shaking hands cordially. "I see that I'm just on time. My daughter, gentlemen, please show her to a seat. I brought her along to help with the singing, in case you had not made other arrangements." "We shall be glad for her help," said Stanton. "Because of illness, the sound of music has not been heard here in many days." "Very well. I wish to speak a word to the bereaved, and then we shall begin." I could never quite make up my mind what was said to the little family group, but from whatever it was, the father seemed to derive strength, while the two girls looked brave and thoughtful. Then the services commenced. The singer's voice was sweet and unaffected. She sang with a depth of tenderness that would have made any song like balm to the wounded heart, and her selections seemed to furnish a fitting outlet for the pent-up melody. "Beautiful Valley of Eden," sang she, and it seemed as if the hushed listeners could see through the mist of tears a happy place with portals wide ajar, through which there appeared bright visions of the pure and blessed. The singing ceased. In an even, mellow voice a selection of Scripture was read, a prayer offered. But my thoughts were far adrift. I was taking mental note of the rapt attention of those about me. The squire seemed to be drinking in every word of the preacher's message. Mr. Edson and the girls seemed to have forgotten their sorrow in their eager listening. What was it the preacher was saying? "There are many things in our experience that are worse than death." I noticed a perceptible shudder pass over Mr. Edson, and then I lost all else in following the thought of the speaker. Sacred as we hold human life, we must ever feel that loss of life is incomparably better than loss of character. The flowers on yonder casket were plucked while their petals sparkled with the morning dew and were laden with fragrance. In the later day, the gardener might have found these same flowers withered and useless. Many there are who point to the coffin lid as it closes over the fond hopes of parent and friend, and say, "Humanity's arch enemy is death." But I tell you no. Better far that the grave should close upon a face unsullied by sinful thought, and unfurrowed by remorse, as that face yonder, than that the lapse of years should close upon a wasted life of disappointed hopes, unfulfilled desires, and blasted affection. That is the saddest thing in this world. In a word, My message is this: Jesus Christ stands beside every one of us today and says, "Don't look down into the dead face. Look up. Your little Alan is not here. He has gone home to a far better dwelling place than even his beautiful earthly house." Jesus Christ also stands beside your dead past of failure and sorrow, and bids you not to look down upon it, but look up. Look up to the noble manhood that may be yours through Christ, up to the purity of a new life in Christ, up to the victory you may have by Christ. Let us look to him now. Toward evening, when the sad rites were over, I left the house, which now seemed unbearably gloomy and desolate, and wandered down to the water where the skiff lay moored. There, upon a gnarled root of the old cottonwood tree, sat Mr. Edson, gazing so intently and dejectedly into the depths of the bayou that I was moved with pity. Remembering what Stanton had said but the evening before, although it seemed an age before when I considered what had transpired, I stepped to Mr. Edson's side. The latter started nervously, and turned upon me a face so livid and haggard that it haunted my dreams for many a night. "Were you thinking of taking a row?" said I, ignoring his confusion. "It's a prime evening. There's half an hour before sunset, and I'm aching to try my strength at the oars. If you've no objection to my using the boat, I'd be glad to have your company on a little trip down to the lagoon. You might point out the objects of interest while I ply the oars." "Certainly," replied Mr. Edson, regaining his composure to a certain extent, and seating himself in the stern while the boat dropped quickly down the bayou. I saw that the burden of the conversation would rest with me, and I found that burden heavier than I had anticipated. I launched at once into a discussion of the different kinds of vegetation we passed, without enlisting my hearer's attention. Then, changing my tactics, I ventured to wonder why Squire White had been present at the funeral that afternoon, but received only a moody, "I am sure I don't know," by way of reply. This was new business for me to direct a conversation so that it might prove helpful by displacing truant thoughts with something better. Nothing daunted, however, I hazarded the remark after a brief silence. The preacher's talk was more practical and helpful than I had dared to hope. Mr. Edson looked up brightly. "Yes," said he, "Daniels has the faculty of getting right at the core of things. I felt that every word this afternoon was meant wholly for me. If I had heard such a doctrine when I was of your age, some things in my life would have been different." Again there came that troubled, despairing look which I had seen upon his face when he sat at the roots of the cottonwood tree. For a while we glided on in the mellowing glow of the sun's last rays, each lost in thought. Finally I broke the silence. "Mr. Edson, if I understood the preacher rightly this afternoon, you are now doing just what he said we ought to avoid. Didn't he say that we are to leave our past life of failure, and that we are to look forward to something better? I so understood him. Mr. Edson, I know that you have had a great deal of sorrow in your life, perhaps more than I realize. But if you have a past to mourn over, so have I. Just think of it, a young fellow of 22 mourning over his past. The idea seems ridiculous, of course, but let me show you how pathetic it may be. Suppose that your oldest child, instead of your youngest, had been a boy, and that when he was 18 you had called him into your room and said to him, 'My boy, your mother and I have toiled and saved for a good many years here on the farm, and we've managed to lay by a few $100s for our old age, but we want our boy to have a college education. Next week the term opens and you must be ready to start.' Suppose again that as the months went by While that boy was in school, his demands upon the home funds became so great that it occasioned many a sacrifice by the dear ones. Comforts, pleasures, and seeming necessities were foregone in order that the boy might not lose any advantage enjoyed by his fellow students. Consider now that this boy has become a purposeless, ambitionless fellow, unfit for the hard toil which should mark his future career. A worthless parasite that has sapped the energies of his parents' best years. What would you think of such a young fellow, Mr. Edson? Hasn't he a past beside which yours looks bright indeed? It would seem so, but knowing as I do somewhat of that young man's present disposition, I am sure that the parents and all concerned will excuse what they will call the thoughtlessness of youth, provided his later years shall prove him worthy of their confidence. Since this seems to be the hour suited for mutual confidences, let us suppose another case. By the way, there is your former camping ground. It may surprise you to know that my daughters and I saw your white tent through the trees one evening as we were rowing here nearly a week before you made your appearance at the house. I sent Uncle Boston on several occasions to reconnoiter at your camp and learn whether you were marauders or men of peaceful intent. Perhaps you had better right the boat about and start for home, as the sun will soon be down. You were just saying that this is the time for mutual confidences, I replied as I righted the boat for the return trip. If the rehearsal of what you are about to say will give you pain, I cannot urge you to proceed, but if it divulges a condition in which I can be of service, I shall be a most willing listener. You shall hear and judge for yourself. I was saying, let us suppose another case. Suppose that you are a man of 45. During your college days you were hurt while playing the old rugby football game. An injury of the bones developed into a necrosis which made operation after operation necessary, with almost constant pain, so that opiates were administered without intermission. The habit grows upon you, so that when pronounced cured of the bone disease, you have contracted a longing for the opium which follows you through your college days. None of your classmates are aware of the nature of your trouble. Only one old professor suspects the truth, and many are his admonitions to give up the horrible stuff before it gets the best of you. You make several half-hearted attempts, but you have come to like the drug with its temporary exhilaration and hours of grateful repose, and your will fails to assert itself. Commencement day comes, but it brings no new resolves or higher purpose for you. You drop into a fair business position and manage to keep the knowledge of your one bad habit from your employers. Soon you marry the girl of your choice, a beautiful creature, fair and pure as the light. In the happiness of your new companionship, you try to drown the pleasures of old-time indulgence, which you know is slowly sapping your strength. Yes, your very life. For a fortnight, you are firm in your purpose to abandon the use of the drug, but at the end of that time, the craving comes irresistibly. One morning you do not awaken at the usual hour, and your wife, becoming alarmed, sends for a physician. That day you do not go to work, and in a year's time you lose your position because of irregularity and inefficiency. Your dear wife, of course, tries to help you to reform. Medical skill, religious skill, and the skill of loving entreaty and encouraging words is employed in vain. You are fast making shipwreck of yourself. One thing after another you try in business, but always with the same result. Your appetite for the dread stuff is stronger than your desire to succeed. In spite of your failures, you are not in want, however, for your wife has a small patrimony. Finally, you place yourself in a hospital under the most rigid watch. But after 4 days have passed, you climb down a fire escape, bribe a passing boy to bring you a prescription from the nearest druggist's, and spend the next 36 hours in indulgent stupor. From that time you lose confidence in yourself, and all else besides. Your long-suffering wife now comes forward with the meager remains of her patrimony, and suggests that you leave your present surroundings and associates for the New South, which is just opening up after the Civil War. This is my story. Here we came, and here we have lived ever since. Here our children were born, and here my dear wife's earthly trials ended, her life being shortened greatly by worry and disappointment, no doubt. My heart bleeds when I think of her. She died happy in the thought that I'd make the last stand successfully. She pressed my hand reassuringly, and smiled even as the death damp settled on her brow. "I'll look for you to conquer," said she, "in his strength." And then a film stole over her eyes, and I felt her hand stiffen in its death clasp. I knelt there long beside the bed, and there I resolved that it would be a death struggle between me and the drug. Yet I must confess that the struggle has not been altogether successful. Mr. Edson, the death of my little son means more to me than you suppose. During the past year or two, he has been the constant companion of my rambles. His bright ways have banished many a gloomy doubt, and I am never more myself than when he is near. It has been my pleasure to impart to him knowledge concerning many natural objects. With the ways of insects and birds his childish brain was filled, and even upon astronomy he could converse intelligently. There seemed to be a happy sympathy between us, which overleapt all the difference of age and established us as comrades. But now he is gone. I did not know until this last week how much I was dependent upon him. It seems as if all hope for the future is gone. The sentence ended in a groan, and again Mr. Esson buried his head in his hands, as the boat grated upon the roots of the cottonwood tree. "Come," said I, taking Mr. Esson's arm and starting along the well-beaten path to the house. "Your confession has helped me by showing how another man who had more to contend with than I has frequently risen above his difficulties. It has also convinced me that there may be truth in what White has so often said, namely, that a man really needs the help of a power above his own to enable him to conquer the foes within. For, says White, we do not fight against flesh and blood, but against spiritual powers. Mr. Esson, my past life has fitted me for anything else but moralizing. Until lately I have thought myself as good as the average man, but my long ride last night through the silent forest has brought me face to face with my worthlessness as nothing else could. And if Stanton is right, and if we should learn our dependence upon an unseen power, perhaps the departure of your beautiful boy has not been without gain for us both." "Well, I, for one, am heartily tired of this continual striving in my own strength," said Mr. Esson. "I have failed so often that I dare not try another prop, lest it fail me and leave me more unbalanced than ever before. I confess that I am in a maze. I must have a talk with Mr. White tonight. He seems to be a good, sensible fellow. I don't mean the squire, but your— Why, I confessed that I had paid no attention to the fact that they have the same name. Now, I want to give you my hand in appreciation of the way you've eased my burden, and I want to say that if there's any chance left for me at all, I'm going to make another stand, and I am going at it right." "You have voiced my sentiments exactly," I said, grasping his hand warmly. "Somehow I believe that it is all going to come out right for both of us." Then the supper bell rang. The girls might not have been there if they had been cast in lesser mold, but with heroic fortitude stifling their sorrow, they were both present. Tear traces had been removed. Marks of mourning were absent. I could not but notice how bravely they smiled at their father as he entered. I had admired both of the girls before, but never did their graces and resourcefulness shine more brightly than during that evening. After supper, Mr. Edson and Stanton went to the library together, while I did something very unusual for me. I retired to my room to think. How long I sat there looking out upon the moonlit yard, while my thoughts wandered far beyond the stately trees or aroma-laden shrubs, I do not know. But the door finally opened, admitting Stanton and Mr. Edson. "Harold, I've good news for you. Mr. Edson has settled the matter and has done it right. We've come to help you to do likewise. Let's all kneel down together. Mr. Edson, now that you see your way clearly, just give Edson a lift, won't you?" I had heard praying before, but I never heard a prayer like that which followed. It was not an eloquent prayer. It began with a sob of penitence, and ended with a pain of victory. The soul's birth cries were mingled with the voice of later experience in such a way as to strangely thrill me. After Stanton had offered another soul-stirring petition, I managed to stammer out 2 words, "O Lord." I could get no farther. "I can't pray, Stanton. It seems like an empty mockery." "You have made a beginning, old man. Perhaps there is some duty you must perform, before the way will become clear to you. I only hope that you will get fully started upon the Christian life soon, because Mr. Edson, though knowing that he has more than human assistance, feels, nevertheless, that your companionship would be a means of stimulus and strength to him. He has some plans which are just beginning to germinate, which he'd like to talk over with you later." "Very well. I think that we can at least try to be companionable," I said. "Thank you," said Mr. Edson. "I cannot tell you how happy I am, despite my sorrow, in the consciousness of a new-found strength. I covet this joy for you very soon. Good night." "Good night, Mr. Edson, and again thank you." End of Section 13. Read by James K. White. Chula Vista.